I know oftentimes when we talk about Christmas time and the Christmas story, we look in the book of Luke. And because Luke gives us a real good full account of this time. But I want us to look in, as we did a bit earlier actually in John chapter 3, but we're going to look in John chapter 1. And I think it's really interesting, starting at verse 9. The true light that gives light to every man and woman was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who receive him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. Listen to this. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father. He came from the Father full of grace and truth. Now it's interesting. I've read the Gospel of John a lot of times before. And what really resonated with me today was that when he came, he was full of grace and truth. He was full of it. Grace and truth. This baby, full of grace and truth. And I've been pondering that and praying about it. And it's interesting because so many people do lots of things to the story of Jesus and the history of Jesus. And they say, well, he was, some people say, Muslims even say, he was a great prophet. But he was just that. He was a great speaker. He was a great religious leader. He was great at building a following and a crowd around him. And for anyone who has really read the Gospels, he was not great at building a crowd around him. He was great at getting a crowd around him, but by the end of the day, his teachings were so hard that it was just him and the disciples again, and the disciples were wondering what was going on. Clearly, this isn't somebody who is great at building a great, big religious movement. And that's the thing that I've been reflecting about, this love that God gives when he gives his baby, when he gives Jesus, is it's not that God had placed a really clever baby into the world that will be really good at soothing people and making people believe in something. Jesus had a tough time getting people to believe in what he was talking about. God didn't birth a really good religious salesman when he brought this baby into the world. When we encounter Jesus in the pages that follow John chapter 1, we don't see a how to start a religion workshop when we see Jesus' life unfold. What we see in him and what spills out in him, out of this only human life born into the world, full of grace and truth, is the love of God. That this grace and truth is what identifies him. He is full of God's grace and God's truth, and that's what spills out. And sometimes that warms people's hearts. And sometimes that makes it very difficult for people and tough for people. We see how tough it makes it for people when we see what happens near the end of the gospel stories. But what we see when we see this child, what is birthed into the world, is the first time that a human being, no stain of sin, but has been full of grace and been full of truth. This is what a fully graceful and God's truthful life looks like and is lived out like. I was thinking about this love and how this is revealed and shown, and I couldn't help but think about farming. And it may have been because I saw Levi do set a few nights ago, but I was just thinking, Levi, when you're planting a 300-foot row of carrots, how do you do it? Like, you got the seeds, you probably got a big bag of seeds, right? A planter, okay. Is it by hand or is it behind a tractor?
Yeah, the tractor. It used to be by hand, but now it's behind the tractor.
Oh, you're
600 foot rows.
600-foot rows, okay. So sorry. La-dee-da. But the planter, you put the seeds in, and does it put it on top of the ground, below the ground?
Just below the ground, about half an inch.
Okay, and then
Every half inch.
and does a nice straight row, not wasting any seeds. That's kind of what I figured. And I've been reflecting on how we plant gardens and what we do with seeds. And then I was looking at Luke chapter 8. It's worth looking at to have the parable of the sower. This is crazy. Makes God kind of the worst kind of farmer. Luke 8:5. A farmer went out to sow his seed. And as he was scattering the seed, some fell on the path. It was trampled on, and the birds of the air ate it up. Some fell on the rock. When it came up, the plants were withered because of no moisture. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up, and it choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, and it came up and it yielded a crop, 100 times more than was sown. Now, if Levi planted carrots this way, I don't know how successful it would be. And I don't think it's just because we're looking at a story 2,000 years ago that they hadn't figured out how to plant carrots or how to plant seeds, that they didn't happen to have a nice seed drill to go behind a tractor, or 600-foot rows maybe. But it wasn't that they hadn't figured it out. This is talking about this abundance. That what God is doing, that the work that God is up to is not just putting grace and truth in small little measures and small little ways and making small, neat little paths. It is this abundance and overflowing of who God is, of grace and truth and love that scatters and is thrown everywhere. Not in a wasteful way, but in a way of an abundance, out of the fullness of who God is. And this has just been so remarkable to me. Because the results of this are amazing. And we see this scattering. And we see a sense of scattering. And God actually uses scattering throughout Scripture. There are times when the people of Israel are scattered. I was looking at in Zechariah. I will sow them among the people of the world, and they shall remember me in far countries. There's a sense that God does this. God spreads far and wide, hugely. I mean, and look at the disciples. We see it again after Jesus' death and resurrection. Do they just kind of keep traveling together as one little group, happy that they got to know Jesus for a time? No, it's a season of scattering. And they start to spread out throughout the world, throughout the whole known world. And I'm so thankful that God isn't so limiting, God isn't so small and narrow and almost so focused. That the scattering even goes beyond the known world. That the story of Christ spreads so far beyond a specific people and a specific location. I mean, now this gospel and this story and this love and this grace and this truth, it's in Westport. How much knowledge of Westport was there in 2 millennia ago in Palestine? And yet here, God's grace and love is overflown even in Westport, across an ocean. Around the world, God's grace and love spills out. And this is what I think is so amazing. It is this grace and truth and this love that gives us so much commonality. We are all so different. We really are. Outside of us having this connection in Christ, I'd like to think I'd be friends with most of you. I wouldn't specifically stay away from any of you. Well, 3 of you, but I'm not going to point. No. But I don't think all of us would get together regularly and have breakfast together the odd Sunday morning, or a potluck together, or these kind of things. But yet we have something. We have something that didn't just stay in Palestine 2,000 years ago. We have something that's been spread, and spread on rocky ground and pathways, but on good soil too, and has spread and been planted in good soil for over 100 generations, that grace and truth and love and fullness that came to earth in that child found me. After over 100 generations. I know back 4 generations in my family tree, and it's even the 4th generation back gets sketchy. So I'm proud to have the last name Miller, and my boys have that name, and for some reason having 3 boys, I think, oh, the Miller name will continue. But my connection to that name goes back 3 or 4 generations. That's it. It doesn't have any meaning beyond that to me. But yet this one moment, this one instant, 2,000 years ago, and what we discover from that moment is that the banner over us still is love. The last ministry team meeting we were talking about, kind of, the banner over me is love kept coming up, and I think of it as kind of a Sunday school song that was coming up, and I don't know, I've been visual. I picture this banner of love, and that it exists over me, and that God is above me. So it was this weird concept. But in this meeting, I just said, wait, maybe the banner over me of love is not just some declaration about who God is, but it's actually a declaration of me. Love. It's God's declaration over me. My banner over you, if it's going to say one word, it will say love. What a great banner to have over you and I. And all of it comes back to this moment. And this is love. This Christmas time, this is love. Not that a religious leader was born 2,000 years ago. Not that a Messiah came for just a selected few group of people or one cultural group of people. But this is love. That a child is born full of grace and full of truth. And it is a grace that is so big. And a truth that is so big that it spills over. It spills over and over and is sown throughout the earth and throughout the generations and still lives as vitally and real and powerful today in my heart and in your heart as it did in the hearts of the disciples. As it did in the heart of a mother who gives birth to a child. And the child who is full of grace and is full of truth. And it spills over throughout your life and throughout your heart and throughout your spirit.